Welcome to the Chiefs briefing for the June 17th, 2025 Democratic Party primary election. We're very happy to have all of you join us today for our briefing, and we have a number of updates to go through with you. First, we want to thank and appreciate our electoral board, the chairman, Honorable Kate Hanley, the vice chairman, Kevin Pinckney, and our secretary of the electoral board, Jeffrey Shapiro. And we're happy to be joined by our general registrar, Eric Spicer, and our deputy director of elections, Cheryl Jones, with us today.
The board to set the early voting.
We have a number of staff for this briefing today, including myself. My name is Ravi Udeshi. I serve as our election manager. We have Gretchen Coleman, our election officer manager, Sean Rogers, our training and operations manager, Jean Tenson, our training and operations specialist, and members of our training and operations staff, including Susan Burnell and Arash Satyashi. For our agenda today, we're going to go through a number of topics. We're going to take about 60 minutes to go through the election overview, what's new for this election, before election day, things you need to do while opening the polls, during the day, covering non-routine and provisional voters, some updates to how we use the voter referral worksheet, reminders for closing the polls, and then we'll open up to all of you for 30 to 45 minutes of questions. And we have a number of people with us to help answer those questions. Gretchen, I believe you have a question for all of our chiefs and assistant chiefs that are with us today. And then after that, I believe we have our general registrar that's going to share some announcements.
Great, thanks, Ravi. And yes, so we are going to do throughout this briefing a couple knowledge checks to make it a little bit more fun and interactive for you all. And so we're going to get started with one is just an introduction so we can kind of get to know who's in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll on your screen so you can go answer. And so the question is, for those of you following along after the fact, before this election, what is the highest position that you have held in a precinct? Your options are chief, assistant chief, provisional specialist, some type of regular election officer, or for some of you, this may be your first time ever serving in a precinct. And if that's the case, welcome. So we'll give you just a couple more moments to answer your question, and then I'll share so you can all see who's all in the room with us today. Like our responses are slowing down a little bit. So I will go ahead and share this with you all. So it looks like many of you already have chief and assistant chief experience. So welcome back. We are really grateful for your support, mentorship for our newer officers, and just all the experience you bring with you. For those of you who this is your first time serving in a leadership capacity, welcome. We are really grateful for you, grateful for your enthusiasm and all that you're going to bring to your precincts. And a special shout out to those of you who it's the first time serving. It may be a little bit intimidating, but that's what this is for, to make sure that you feel comfortable and confident on election day. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Gretchen. And if we could go to our general registrar and director of elections, Eric Spicer, who has some comments he'd like to share with you.
Thank you, Robbie. Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, I am not invisible. I'm having a little problem with my camera, but just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everybody. You're the core of what we do, the chiefs and assistant chiefs. This we expect will be a slow election. It's been slow so far, and sometimes those are the most difficult and challenging elections. You need to stay on top of your game, which I'm confident that you will. Ravi and his team have provided some very valuable information, fantastic notebook that's just gotten better every time. Ravi and I have been doing this, about 7.5 years. It is a pleasure working with all of you. I'm confident we're going to have a terrific day, and good luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's an exciting time to work in the election space, and we're very happy to be with you and with everyone else that's here for this briefing, and all of our attendees today, all of our wonderful chiefs and assistant chiefs who are serving with us this June. We have one more exciting update that we wanted to share with all of you as chiefs and assistant chiefs. As you may know, there's a federal agency, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, that supports elections nationwide. And Fairfax County was deeply honored and humbled to be recognized by the Election Assistance Commission earlier this year with 5 National Clearies Awards and Honorable Mention Awards for innovations in election administration and improvements in poll worker recruiting training and retention practices that we implemented last year, including for our closing procedures workshop to help all of you with closing procedures, including the timeline exercise and tapes exercise, for our voter referral worksheet to help process provisional voters, the provisional overlays that help you catch any missing fields on those provisional envelopes, our SOR helper app to help you map all the numbers from your closing process to the SOR and avoid having to do calculations manually, and our election officer evacuation guides on the back of each station guide. We wanted to share this update with you for two reasons. One, we're deeply appreciative of this honor, but more importantly, it's a testament to the work and suggestions that all of you have provided to us. We're proud to work side by side with all of you as chiefs and assistant chiefs, and we're so grateful for the suggestions that you've offered us to help us improve how we administer elections here in Fairfax County and our ability to then make improvements based on your feedback and input. We're looking forward to continuing to do that, and we encourage you to continue reaching out if you have suggestions for ways that we can improve our process. Now let's get into an overview of this overall election. First and foremost, all of you as chiefs and assistant chiefs will receive a chief's notebook, just like in past elections, with everything you need to know for this election. We encourage you to review the table of contents before Election Day and familiarize yourself with all the contents of the notebook. That doesn't mean you need to memorize everything in the notebook. It just means you want to know where to look for things when you need them. And of course, remember that we provide you checklists for every procedure that you need to follow before and on Election Day. And all we ask is that you simply follow the checklist, which will include all the updates that we're going to cover in this briefing. So again, if you just simply follow the checklist, you won't have any issues. We provide you purple checklists for the things that you need to do during your setup of the polling place before Election Day. We provide you with those green checklists for all the things that you need to do while opening the polls. We give you yellow checklists for things that officers need to know during the day, and we provide you red checklists for the procedures that need to be followed while closing the polls. As it relates to opening the polls and closing the polls, remember that all of you in your Chief's notebook also have a Chief's opening checklist and a Chief's closing checklist. So the idea is you follow your checklist, which lets you know when you need to distribute materials, when you need to assign tasks to election officers, and helps you verify that all the core tasks are done. So you follow the checklist in your notebook, and you hand out copies of all of these other checklists to all of your election officers. We give you separate handouts for everything, so you can hand them out to the appropriate officer. And as long as you follow every checklist, you won't have any issues. Now for this election, the ballot has two contests. And remember, it's a Democratic Party primary election. So these contests are for the Democratic primary specifically. Those contests include one for the Lieutenant Governor, and there are 6 candidates running in that contest, and for Attorney General, and in that there are 2 candidates running in that contest. And again, there is no Republican Party primary in this election. We made a significant change to our terminology used to refer to voting equipment this election. This is something we've gone over with all of you in training, and we want to remind you of it as we gear up for Election Day now. So our poll pads are now being referred to in all of our guides, our Chief's notebook, our documentation as e-poll books, electronic poll books. The express vote devices are now being referred to as ballot marking devices. And the DS300 scanners are now being referred to as ballot scanners. You might be wondering, why did we make this change? Well, we want to use terminology that's more semantic and understandable for everyone that needs to use this voting equipment, including all of you as election officers, but also voters who are going to come in. Because right now, if you had told a voter, go to the DS300 to cast your ballot, they don't know what that machine is or what it does. But now you can direct a voter and tell them, go cast your ballot on the ballot scanner. And they have a much better idea of what that machine is and what they're being asked to do. So just keep in mind, throughout all of our guides in our notebook, we're using these new terms now. So speaking of which, what will you receive as part of your resource allocation to each precinct? Well, you're going to have 3 to 5 e-poll books to help check in voters. You'll receive 2 ballot marking devices, and you'll receive 2 ballot scanners, all the same as in past elections. You'll also have 2 admin tablets that can be used by the chief, assistant chief, or provisional specialist as needed. and you're going to receive ballots for 20 to 40% of voters. So far, turnout has been a little bit lower than we expected in this election, but we don't know what it'll look like on election day, and we want to make sure you have enough ballots for anything that may come up. You'll also have 5 to 8 total election officers in each precinct, which includes the chief, the assistant chief, the 2 collector officers who leave during closing procedures, and all other regular officers and language officers. Note that only a handful of precincts are going to have a dedicated provisional specialist in this election, given the expectation of a low number of provisional ballots countywide. However, if in your precinct on election day, you start experiencing a significant number of provisional voters and provisional ballot situations, please call us and let us know. We have reserved provisional specialists that we can send your way. All right, now let's jump into all the things that are new for this election. Our biggest change in this election is that we've received new ballot scanners. So as we noted, you now have DS300 ballot scanners that replace the previous DS200 ballot scanners that were in use for the last 10 years. All of you have come in for an in-person training class. You've had an opportunity to practice and use the new ballot scanners. So you already know that the equipment functions very similarly to the previous ballot scanners. It's just a little bit easier to use and much faster. For example, during closing procedures, your tapes will now print 3 to 5 times as fast as they did before. And every little bit helps when you're trying to get out of there on election night. In line with our other terminology updates, there's one more term update that we want to make you aware of. There's a slot on each ballot scanner that was previously referred to as the auxiliary compartment. We've now updated that name and we're calling it the emergency compartment to better reflect its purpose. As a reminder, this is the slot that you would use, the compartment you would use in the event that the scanner is not able to accept ballots in the normal method. And in that case, you would open the emergency compartment and ask voters to deposit their ballots in there. Of course, you receive 2 ballot scanners. So if one isn't working, you can direct voters to use the other one in the meantime. You don't immediately have to go and open the emergency compartment. And of course, give us a call in the office so we can send out a technician to help repair the machine that's not working. In order to improve and enhance our security and chain of custody procedures, we're now asking you to place 2 zip tie seals on each ballot scanner during voting hours. So you're going to place a zip tie seal on the emergency compartment, as well as a zip tie seal on the ballot compartment. This provides an overt, visible sign to anyone, whether that's voters or authorized representatives or anyone else that comes through the voting room, that these compartments have not been modified or tampered with during voting hours and that they've remained sealed. So this is just an update to enhance our procedures. We've made some small updates to the voter referral worksheet for this election. As you may recall, this is a worksheet that we significantly overhauled last year, and we noticed that we had almost half of our avoidable provisional errors be eliminated due to your use of the voter referral worksheet. And we're very appreciative of that. We want to do everything we can to help each voter's vote be able to be counted. In this election, one change we've made now is to simplify the form for the most common situation you encounter in each precinct, which are voters who need to do a same-day registration. Our update was informed by a lot of data analysis. We looked at the 16,000 voter referral worksheets that were submitted last election for every provisional voter. We also talked with many of you about the procedures in your precincts, and some of us went out to precincts on election day to see how the previous voter referral worksheet and provisional procedures were being utilized. Based on that, we made the change in Part C of this form. So you can see on the left side of your screen in Part C, we made a change to simplify how you handle it for same-day registration voters and to be able to best help the voter that's in front of you help at the location at which they're at. Sean is going to go through this in much more detail later in the briefing. Another exciting update for you is that we've deployed a new app on your admin tablets called the Precinct and Address Lookup app, or PAL. PAL replaces My Neighborhood, which was the previous app we were using to help you during the provisional process and any time that you had to check if a voter had moved. The My Neighborhood app was created for general county use, whereas PAL is now specialized for elections use. When you open and use this app, you would search for a voter's address, and then it'll show you in big bold letters the key information that you need to be able to help process that voter in conjunction with the voter referral worksheet. So for example, in this case, a address was searched for, and we can see that this address is in precinct 849 Newgate North. We can see that it's in the 11th congressional district, which we may need if we have to check the moving conditions for this voter. And we can see that the voter's polling place is Centerville High School. So this is also an easy way for you to verify that a voter's in the right place if they come to your precinct. So we're very excited about this, and we look forward to all of you being able to use this on your admin tablets in this election. Next, we have acquired and deployed new provisional bags in this election. For those of you who served in November, you may recall that we implemented a procedure for securing your provisional ballot envelopes throughout the day to meet all legal and statutory requirements. Well, we've heard your feedback, and we want to make this process easier going forward. So now, all provisional ballot envelopes, once completed by the voter, will be deposited in this provisional bag. You, as the chief or assistant chief or your provisional specialist, will take that completed provisional ballot envelope and deposit it in this bag during the day. This applies for all provisional ballots, including for SDRs and non-SDRs. And then during closing procedures, your officers will remove the provisional ballot envelopes from this bag and move them into the appropriate envelope number 1A for transport to the Office of Elections. Now, for this bag, do note that you are going to have to apply a seal and a lock on it during voting hours. There are two posters that are not new, but have been updated for this election. First, on the left, we have an updated version of the Using the Ballot Scanner poster that now reflects the appropriate procedures for the new ballot scanners we've received. On the right, we've updated the poster that handles how a voter can opt out of receiving automatic mail ballots if someone is on the permanent absentee list. So again, these are posters that simply replace previous versions of these posters, and you would post them in the voting room. For this election, we made updates to two of the forms that you use. Those are the machine certification form and the closing numbers worksheet. So take a quick look at these overall forms. You can see on the machine certification form, there's a new section at the top of it. And on the closing numbers worksheet on the right, we can see some updates in the bottom right part. So let's zoom in on each of those. On the machine certification form, at the top of the form, there's a new box where you'll record the seals that are applied to the provisional bag and the ballot scanner, ballot compartment, and emergency compartment. So when you apply those seals during opening procedures, your officers will need to record the seals on this form. So it's a simple change, but do make sure to record those seals. If for any situation you need to then later open the emergency compartment, if you do need to actually use it, then you can see there's a small section at the bottom of this where you would record the information about the time that you had to make that change and the new seal number. For the closing numbers worksheet, there's two changes we want you to be aware of. So first, we've combined the sections where you record the numbers from the ballot scanners. And these numbers are now copied over from the closing tapes directly. Previously, some numbers were copied from the screen of the scanner and some from the tapes. But we wanted to streamline this process, so all these numbers now come from the tapes. So for each closing tape, for each scanner, you would look to see what was the public count on the machine. That's the total number of ballots cast in that day. And you would also record the number of total standard ballot sheets. Those are those regular ballots that most voters cast. And the number of express vote cards or ballot marking device cards, which are the ones used on the ballot marking device. So in our example here, you can see there were 100 total ballots cast on scanner number 1, of which 99 were total standard ballot sheets, and there was 1 express vote card. So those bottom two numbers always add up to the number on top. The other change on the closing numbers worksheet is a new box for recording the number of forms returned in envelope number 8. You may ask yourself, why are we making this change? Well, we want to make sure we have a better accounting of the number of forms that you're using, because these are forms used to process and assist non-routine voters. And when we go back and try and help you figure out why a mistake may have occurred, sometimes we realize that certain forms are not being completed. This helps us check, and for you to check, that these forms are being properly utilized during the non-routine voter process. So we're asking for 4 of these forms: the affirmations of eligibility, ID confirmation statements, requests for assistance, and voter registration applications to be counted and recorded here. And we've updated our closing checklist to make this part of the process for your officers. Next, we implemented the SOR Helper app in the presidential election, and it was a really big success. About half of all precincts chose to use the SOR Helper app. And this app, as a reminder, it allowed you to input all the numbers from your closing numbers worksheet, that form that collects all the different closing numbers. You put those numbers into the form on the admin tablet, and then it gave you a digital PDF of what all your numbers should look like, where they should go, with all calculations done for you. And the only thing you had to then do was copy all of those numbers to your paper statement of results and make sure all officers sign. So in this election, this SOR Helper app is now required because we want to make sure that we are minimizing mistakes that occurred during this process. And in the last election, for those precincts that use the SOR Helper, we saw almost no mistakes. For the precincts that didn't use the SOR Helper, we did continue to notice the same types of errors we've seen in past elections. And we want to do everything we can to help you reduce those types of errors. Now, if you do encounter any technical challenge on election day, if you can't access the app or it's not opening, then you can proceed with the procedures as we've had them in the past, and fill out the SOR manually. We don't expect that to occur, and we would hope that you're all able to successfully use this app, which again will help you minimize errors. Now, Gretchen, let's go back to you for a knowledge check question.
Thanks, Rafi. And so we will go ahead and launch our first knowledge check for this briefing. And the question is, in most precincts, who will be responsible for assisting provisional voters in this election? Your options are provisional specialist, collector officers, the chief and the assistant chief, or none of the above. It looks like you guys are doing great. I'll give you just a couple more moments to answer.
Gretchen, I'm heartened that so far no one has selected collector officers.
Or none of the above. That's also a good
True.
one. Yes, somebody in your precinct is responsible for provisionals.
That's a little bit of a trick question. It harkens back to something I mentioned in terms of the resources we're deploying, the number of election officers we're using in this election.
Just a couple more moments. Go ahead and end the poll. And it looks like, yep, you guys knocked this one out of the park, that in this election, it is the chief and the assistant chief who will be responsible for assisting provisional voters. There are a handful of precincts that will have a provisional specialist, and the places that we anticipate may have a higher volume. But in almost every precinct, that'll be for the chief and the assistant chief. So if you haven't handled provisionals in a while because you have a provisional specialist in your precinct, usually this is a good chance for you to get some practice. But on election day, if you guys feel like you're swamped and you are spending a lot of time on provisionals and are having a really high volume, give us a call. We can send some reinforcements in to help you out. But otherwise, we think that this should be a manageable number just for the chief and the assistant chief. And with that, we are going to go ahead and talk about some of the pre-election tasks that you all should be working on before election day. And start, if there is anything that you take away from this section at all, it would be this slide right here, to make sure that you are checking regularly for communication from our office. So that's our email and our phone number there on the screen. And we are sending, as you're probably aware at this point, many, many reminder emails to make sure that we give you all the important information before election day. And so make sure you're checking your emails regularly so you have all that information. If you haven't done so already, we recommend that you add us to your contacts, so both into your email and to your phone contacts. Make sure that our messages don't get lost in the shuffle or in spam, and you're able to see all those important reminders from us. And so the next thing to know for your pre-election responsibilities is that for chiefs in particular, there are a number of tasks that we ask you to complete before election day. And we've collected all of those in one easy spot for you in the election officer portal. So if you go into the Chiefs page of the portal, you can see all the different tasks you need to do before election day, all the resources that you need to complete those tasks, and you can even check them off to get a visual indicator of the progress you're making before election day. For example, to get to your precinct roster, you would click on that open roster button to see the list of officers assigned to your precinct, and then you can let us know once you've completed those tasks by checking that off in the portal. Once you watch today's briefing, which is a requirement for all of you, and you complete the quiz, that'll get checked off here as well. Note that this page is only for chiefs. So assistant chiefs and the reserve chiefs and reserve assistants don't have quite the same pre-election responsibilities as the chiefs. So you'll be able to see your required tasks, but you won't have this checklist function yourself. A couple of things to highlight in particular, due this upcoming Friday for the election to make sure that you're on track ahead of time, are 4 main things you need to do by this Friday. The first one is to contact your polling place. So you can find your polling place facility contact info in the election officer portal. And we have a list in the Chief's notebook of the types of things you should be asking your polling place. Things like logistical information, parking, coordinating your setup time, things like that. It's really important that you make this contact early so you can troubleshoot any issues that may come up to make sure that you have enough tables and chairs in your precinct, all kinds of important things. So the first thing is to contact your polling place. Your second piece is to select your supply pickup and site setup times for Monday, June 16th, which is the day before Election Day. So during that Monday setup, you're going to go to one of our 4 depot locations across the county to pick up your supplies, and then you're going to go straight from that location to your precinct to do that site setup with your election officers. And so by this Friday, we need you to go into the portal and let us know which depot you're going to, when we should expect you, and what time you're going to go to your polling place so we can make sure to plan and have everything ready for you when you arrive. The third thing you need to do by this Friday is to contact the officers on your roster. So this is the list of election officers who are assigned to serve with you in your precinct, and you can find their names and contact information in the election officer portal. Again, in the Chief's notebook, we've got a list and a template of all the different things you should be communicating to your officers, and so you can look at that for reference. We'll be reaching out to all election officers as well, but it's really important that they hear from you directly to make sure that they get the important information related specifically to your polling place and your precinct operations. So send that that first communication by this Friday. We also ask that you keep checking back in your precinct roster frequently. So you're welcome to download the initial list of names, but keep checking back in the portal if there are any updates. If there are cancellations, you'll be able to see who's canceled and is no longer on your screen. But there's a chance that we've reassigned an officer. We've pulled some people and bumped them up to be assistant chief in another precinct, and so they might not show up on your roster anymore. So keep checking back frequently to get that most up-to-date list. And finally, the last thing you need to do by this Friday is to complete this briefing. So by watching this, you're already right on your way, and you'll also complete a brief attendance quiz, and we'll send out the link for that shortly after this. So the chiefs have these 4 things to do by Friday. If you're an assistant chief or a reserve chief or a reserve assistant chief, the one thing you need to do for this Friday is to complete the briefing. The next big event coming up is my personal favorite part of the election is the chief open house. So this is open to all chiefs, assistant chiefs, reserves. So if you're watching this briefing, you're welcome to join us. And it'll come next Tuesday, June 10th, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. here at the Fairfax County Government Center. This is a really cool event because it's a great opportunity to get hands-on practice with anything you might have questions about before Election Day. So we'll have a station for provisionals, for poll books, for closing. I know that closing stresses a lot of you guys out. So we've got some really cool exercises that our training and operations team has put together to practice with the tapes, to practice with the SOR, and anything else that might be giving you pause. This is also an opportunity to pick up the paper copy of your Chief's notebook before Election Day. I know that many of you like to have that a few days early so you can start flipping through things, making your selections, marking up your selections in there. And so this is an opportunity to get that paper copy early. So to sign up for the Chief Open House, go to the election officer portal and pick an entry time. And so once you do that, you can stay for as long or as little as you like. So if you just have a couple quick questions to get answered, that's great. If you want to go to every single station in the room 3 times, please do, and we're happy to have you for that. In addition to the Chief Open House, we have one final Chief Workshop coming up after the Chief Open House as well, and so you can sign up for that in the Election Officer portal. That's a good option if you want a little bit more guided practice rather than a drop-in opportunity. You can come to our Chief Workshop. And again, this will all happen at the Fairfax County Government Center. The next thing that'll happen before Election Day is that Monday setup I was talking about earlier. You'll have selected which depot you're going to and what times, and then you will go to your depot at that selected time to pick up your materials. That'll be the black kit and your poll books. And you will go from there, from the depot location to your polling place directly for site setup. Your election officers will meet you there and help set up your precinct so everything will go smoothly on Tuesday morning. And so if you're in a Fairfax County Public School facility, we've arranged that you have a setup window at your location sometime between 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. So you have to start and end within that time period. If you're at a different facility, you'll work that out individually with your facility staff. It's really important that you go there directly from the depot to the site setup. You have your poll books with you, and that's really important election materials. And so for the security of our equipment, it's important that you go there directly. The final thing that we ask you that you do before Election Day is to prepare and get ready. And so Ravi mentioned the Chief's notebook. We don't expect you to read and memorize everything in there. We know it's quite lengthy, but you should familiarize yourself with the contents. You should know where things are located. So when situations come up on election day, that you know where to locate and problem solve as necessary. The two chapters that we ask that you focus on in particular before election day, however, and read more carefully, are the last two. Chapter 14, which focuses on emergencies, and chapter 15, which focuses on evacuation procedures if you ever need to leave your polling place and set up shop somewhere else. It's really important that you read these ahead of time because in the case of an emergency, you're not going to have time to go back to your notebook and start flipping through and figuring out what to do. You're going to need to act quickly and decisively. So the more advanced preparation you do ahead of time, the easier things will be for you. And we'll touch on emergency preparations in just a few minutes as well. If you have any other questions about what you should be doing before election day, we are always a phone call away and are happy to talk you through it. So please just give us a call. But with that, we have set up for, we've prepared for election day, we're ready to go. And so we're going to talk about what you need to do now to open the polls. So to start with the equipment, we ask that you set up both of your ballot scanners and one of your ballot marking devices from the get-go. So while the polls are open, you only need to use one ballot scanner at any given time. You're welcome to turn the other one around, move it out of the flow of traffic. But then if anything were to happen where you need to troubleshoot or get some assistance in your ballot scanner, you want to have the other one ready to go and you don't want to waste time setting things up in the middle of the day. So set up both ballot scanners first thing in the morning. We also ask that you set up one of your ballot marking devices from the get-go. So if you have a voter who wants to use the ballot marking device, you don't want to take several minutes to get it booted and set up, you want to have that ready for them to use as well. To make sure that all of these machines are ready for the polls to open at 6. Ravi already mentioned the seals in the ballot scanner, but just as a reminder, this is when you'll put them on. You'll add a zip tie seal both to the emergency compartment and to the ballot compartment. Ravi had also mentioned the provisional bag, and so you will set that up during the opening procedures as well. We've got step-by-step instructions for how to set it up in the Chief's notebook, but it's pretty straightforward. There are some flaps in there that you bring up to the top for some structural support, and then you'll zip it closed. And then you will seal the zipper through the metal grommet that's next to it to make sure that it can't be opened during the day. You can see that both the lock and the yellow zip tie seal are threaded through both the zipper and the grommet there to make sure that it's secure. The final thing you do to set up the provisional bag is on the top of it, when you're looking down at it face down, you will open up the little plastic piece there for the slot. So when you open that up, you'll be able to insert ballot envelopes through that slot there. And so you'll be able to have the bag functioning during the day. And sounds complicated, but just look at the checklist and you'll be fine. Then one final reminder on the seals that Ravi was talking about earlier. You will note all of the seals that you use during opening procedures here at the top of the machine certification form. The final thing that we ask that you do during opening procedures to make sure that everyone is set for the polls being open is to meet with your officers and make sure that they're aware of what to do in case of an emergency. You won't have time to figure out how to respond to an emergency when it's going on, so it's really important that you do that preparation ahead of time. So we ask that in that final morning meeting where you're going over final updates with your officers, you review the emergency procedures to make sure people are aware of what the protocols are. You designate the outside meeting location in case of an evacuation, so everyone goes to the same spot. And you also ask your officers to complete their evacuation guides. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment, but at this point of the day, it's really important that officers just are aware of what the evacuation guides are and fill out this top portion at the top that we use in case of placing a call to 911. So replacing a call to 911, it's really important that you know the address, some important logistical information that you may panic and forget in the case when everyone's worried about an emergency. But if you've written that down ahead of time, you've written down the building address, the building location, the evacuation meetup point, all of that information, you'll be able to give it to the emergency responder right away, and they can divert the resources there as quickly as possible. So just take a few minutes before the polls open to make sure that all officers in the precinct are aware of what to do in case of an emergency. Finally, if you have any questions during opening procedures, give us a call. These numbers are also noted in the inside cover of the Chief's notebook, but just briefly, for any policies, procedural questions, or any emergency situations, call general support. This is the same number that you'd call before Election Day if you have any questions. We also ask that you give us a call around 5:30 a.m. if there are any officers who are on your roster who have not yet arrived in your precinct. We have a number of reserve officers waiting on standby to fill in for last-minute cancellations, and so we will send them out to your precinct to make sure that you're fully staffed for Election Day. So give us a call if you're short on officers. If you have any equipment issues, call tech support, and if you have any questions about specific voter situations, call our voter support line. One final thing to know about phone calls is that between 5 and 6 a.m., we are really generally pretty busy with a lot of calls coming in as people are setting up their precincts. And so we ask that only call us during that time if it's an emergency that would prevent the polls from opening on time. We absolutely want to help you out, and we'll do everything we can to get your precinct to open. If there's something is not super urgent, if there's a supply you need to locate sometime later in the day, wait until 6:30 or 7, and we're happy to answer your call and talk you through it then. But with that, you've done everything you need to do for the polls to open, and we can go ahead and talk about what to do during the day. We have checklists for most of the things you need to do during the day, but here are a couple of reminders, things to keep in mind. The first are turnout surveys. So 3 times throughout the day, we're going to check in with you and ask how many voters have voted so far in your precinct, how many provisionals you have, that kind of thing, which is really important for us to keep track on, keep a pulse on how things are going in your precinct, and also potentially bring up more materials, more ballots, more support if as necessary. And so we'll send out text reminders at each of these times to make sure that you're ready, and remember to do the turnout survey. So just be on the lookout for that and respond and fill out the survey on your admin tablet as soon as possible. Any officer in your precinct can complete the turnout surveys. So when we send you a message at noon and you're in the middle of something with the voter, just hand your admin tablet to another election officer in the precinct and they can fill it out for you. Next, you may get some visitors to your precincts on Election Day. We've got a full list in the Chief's notebook of the types of visitors and what they are and are not permitted to do in the precinct, so definitely refer to that if you have any questions. In particular, there may be some authorized representatives, also known as poll watchers, who come to your precinct. One thing to keep in mind, because this is a primary election, not a general, is that all authorized representatives must be affiliated with a particular candidate on the ballot. In a general election, they're usually affiliated with the political party more broadly, but in a primary election, they must have an authorization letter from a specific candidate. Next, you may have some news media come by to your precinct. You're welcome to answer some factual questions about your precinct going on there and refer them to the office for anything more complicated than that. But again, look at the Chief's notebook for more specific guidance on media, authorized reps, and anybody else who may come by your precinct. As I mentioned earlier, there may be an emergency that happens in your precinct, and we've detailed a lot of different procedures, protocols in the Chief's notebook, so please read that carefully. But in general, in case of an emergency, the main things to remember are call 911 right away to get immediate assistance. Do what you need to do to make sure that everyone is safe, taken care of, and that we have emergency responders on the scene. Then, as soon as it is safe and you're able to do so, give us a call right away to alert us. We'll do lots of coordination on our end with other agencies across the county to make sure that you have all the resources you need to continue voting for the rest of the day. So call 911 first, and then call our general support line to report the issue to us. We also ask that in the case of emergency, keep calling our office to provide us regular updates, so we're always apprised of the current conditions and can divert any extra resources as necessary. In terms of types of emergencies that may come up while the polls are open, one could be an evacuation. So this would happen because of a fire or even just a fire alarm, a bomb threat, an earthquake, a gas leak, or any other situation where it's not safe for you to remain in your polling place. In that situation, you need to move your voting operation elsewhere. Generally, the first step would be to go immediately outside of your polling place, such as in the parking lot, and start setting up your voting location there. But it may be necessary to move to a completely new location. And in that situation, we will let you know what that is and make sure that you have the resources you need to get to that new location. And so I was talking about the evacuation guides earlier, and this is when they come into play. So in the case of an evacuation, you just have a few minutes to make sure that you get everything you need to do, everything you need to resume voting in another location, which means you don't have time to deliberate who's taking what, where do we go, what is everyone's role. You have to act really quickly. And so we've helped you out with that by making sure that every officer has a clearly defined role in case of an evacuation. And so for the chiefs and the assistant chiefs, this information is in your chief's notebook in the evacuation guide section. For election officers, this is on the back side of their yellow during the day guides. So at every station around the precinct, there's information on what to do just for regular precinct operations. And the backside of that will have evacuation instructions. So for example, the check-in officers have that script on their yellow during the day guide with how to check in a voter and the things they say to the voter during that. The backside of that sheet will have, in the case of an evacuation, grab the poll books and get outside as quickly as possible. So make sure election officers are aware of those materials and know what their role is in an evacuation. Another emergency that may happen in your precinct is a medical emergency. This could happen to a voter, to an election officer, or any other individual who may be in your polling place. In that situation, the first thing you need to do is call 911. When in doubt, if you're on the fence about the severity of the medical incident, err on the side of caution and make sure they get the medical assistance they need. When it's safe to do so, and as time permits, we ask that you fill out the medical incident report form to capture some important information and provide us good documentation so we can follow up on the incident after the fact and make sure to stay in touch with the individual and get them the resources that they need. You can find this form in the red emergency envelope. So in the case of a medical emergency, get the individual help first by calling 911 and then fill out this medical incident report form. So those are the main tasks to know during the day. You're always welcome to reach out to us with any questions before or on election day if you have any questions. But with that, we're going to transition into another knowledge check. So we'll go ahead and launch this. And you can see which are the pre-election tasks that chiefs need to complete by Friday, June 6th. And for this one, you can select as many as that apply. And it looks like you all are knocking it out of the park with this one again.
Gretchen, I think I saw that the first 14 respondents got the answer perfectly right so far, picked all the right options. Let's see if we can continue that.
Yeah, you guys are doing great.
Also, I have to say, I know there are tasks, some tasks have to be done by Friday, June 6th, some that have to be done a little later. But if I see some people picking all of this as being done by June 6th, which is great. We love people who are proactive and get everything done early.
You can't set up your polling place for 2 weeks early, but you can do everything else if you want to. But there are 4 things that we need you to do by this Friday at the latest. We'll give you a few more moments. And if you're confused, don't worry, we're going to send you so many emails over the next few days to make sure that you're on track. But yes, you guys are doing great. And it looks like you guys got the right answer, which are these first 4 tasks are due this Friday. So contacting your polling place, selecting your pickup and setup times for Monday, June 16th, doing your first contact of the roster of officers in your precinct, and complete the attendance quiz for watching this briefing. Make sure you go into the election officer portal after this to complete all of those tasks. And again, this is for chiefs, for assistant chiefs, and for the reserves. The thing you need to do by this Friday is to watch the briefing. Awesome. Well, thank you all. And I'm going to transition it over to Sean to talk about non-routine and provisional voters.
Thanks, Gretchen. We've talked about considerations before Election Day and during Election Day. Keeping with that theme, I'm going to talk a little bit about non-routine voters and provisional voters. This is one of the most important tasks that we ask of chiefs and assistant chiefs, is to be able to assist voters who have some sort of special circumstance or non-routine circumstance such that your regular election officers can't check them in and get them voting normally at the check-in table. You'll work through these voters' individualized situations to find out what their voting options are, whether they may or may not be voting provisional. We'll dive into some considerations there right here. Before going too in-depth on non-routine voters, let me take one step before that and talk about situations where there's not quite a voter eligibility issue, which we would have with a non-routine voter, but rather just other problems that can occur in your precinct. In your Chief's Notebook, you have Chapter 10, Problem Solving, and this has step-by-steps for a lot of situations that you might encounter, such as de-escalating certain interactions with voters or authorized representatives, canceling or editing a check-in on your e-poll book. Let's say you forgot to say that this voter needed assistance. Spoiling and replacing a ballot, how to deal with overvoted ballots. Those sorts of fairly straightforward things are all collected in Chapter 10, Problem Solving. So you can refer to that throughout the day as these circumstances come up, and we would encourage you to, like every section of the notebook, take a look at that beforehand so you know sort of what to expect. But beyond problem solving, let's talk actually about non-routine voters. And this is all detailed in Chapter 8 of the Provisional Notebook. I'm sorry, the Chief's Notebook. Chapter 8 is non-routine and what ifs for provisional voters. There are, or for non-routine voters, there are all of the prompts that you'll get on the e-poll books throughout the day are listed here in a one easy resource for you to refer to them and say, what is going on with this voter? The voter is marked as inactive. What does that mean? The voter is marked as issued an absentee ballot. What does that mean? That's all collected in Chapter 8, non-routine and what ifs, in the Chief's notebook. And additionally, there are the what ifs, which is a document from the Virginia Department of Elections that essentially goes very into detail about each and every voter situation. What if the voter is this? What if the voter has this going on? And so that'll give you a full page step-by-step for each voter situation. So we have the Chapter 8 to sort of distill down some situations, and then the full explanation in the what ifs. And you'll see in many of these resources, we kind of refer to each other throughout from one to the other. So another one that you'll have is the prompts that show up on the e-poll book. If a voter has a situation in their voter record that means that necessitates being sent over to the chief or assistant chief table, it will tell you what to do. I'm just going to read this one here. If a voter has a status of absentee pre-processed, that means they've returned their absentee by mail ballot. And you as the chief officer will learn that the voter has already voted and can only vote a provisional ballot, which is reason number 5, which we'll get to in a moment. It refers to Section A on the voter referral worksheet, which I'll also get to in a moment. It also tells you which what if number that's going to be, which is 20C. That's in your chief's notebook. And so in multiple places, we're bringing together the different resources so that you have all the information at hand to help these voters. But in certain circumstances, you'll want to start with just the poll pad prompts or the e-poll book prompts, because they'll direct you to further resources and direct you to the right action to take. Beyond the chief's notebook with the what ifs and the e-poll book prompts, we also have the voter referral worksheet, which Ravi talked about earlier. I'll go into detail on this in the next section, but briefly, this outlines the workflow for the situations that are most likely to become a provisional ballot. So this takes you through the step-by-steps for these provisional situations where they're going to end up voting a provisional ballot, or you need to work through whether or not a provisional ballot is appropriate, and helps you through that line of reasoning and gives you a place to record any of the information that you need to record. So like, for instance, with same-day registration voters, well, you need a place to write down what is their address. This form has that information. And then the backside becomes a checklist for the provisional process. The front side is used for the chief and assistant chief to make that determination. And the backside ordinarily is used for the provisional specialist to make sure that we follow the full 12-step process with each voter to make sure that they have their provisional done entirely and completely. In this election, as Ravi mentioned, almost every precinct will have this duty fall to the chief and the assistant chief. In only a select few precincts will we have a provisional specialist. So here on this referral worksheet, and wherever you see provisional specialist in our materials, you can think chief or assistant chief. I want to talk about some of our most common non-routine situations. Having talked about the resources that are available to you, let's get into detail on what you're most likely to expect throughout the day, because there are many, many reasons that a voter could be a non-routine voter. But honestly, the vast majority of them, or very many of them, are going to be these types of circumstances. If a voter has moved from their address and they didn't tell our office, that is, they did not re-register at their new address or change their address, or if they're not on the poll book at all, let's say they've never registered, they just moved in from another state, they just turned 18, something like that. Those are all examples of what's going to be a same-day registration. We had over 16,000 provisionals in the November election. Over 14,000 of those were same-day registrations. Percentage-wise, it's going to be our most common provisional reason. And so working through voters' address situations to determine when it is and isn't appropriate for them to do a same-day registration is something you're going to want to pay close attention to. Something I'm going to point out here, and something that we always mention, is that a same-day registration has to be cast or has to be completed in the precinct where the voter lives. So if the voter lives in your precinct, that's when you can do a same-day registration. If they're not on your poll book, but they're not in your precinct, that's where you would stop and reconsider and work through the situation with the voter to determine if you would proceed with that or not. And like I said, same-day registrations only happen in the precinct where the voter lives. And we'll talk about how you're going to figure that out in the next section, that precinct where the voter lives. Secondly are absentee situations. And principally among those is the voter is marked as having been issued an absentee ballot and they brought it with them. That's pretty straightforward. The voter is going to surrender that ballot to you and be issued a ballot in the precinct to vote on machine in that precinct. That one's pretty, like I said, that's straightforward. The voter brought in their ballot, they turn it in, they get a new ballot to vote. Now, of course, if they don't have that ballot with them, that would be a provisional, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but that would be a provisional for not having their issued absentee ballot. Those are two of the ones that we see the most often is a same-day registration or a simple absentee surrendered. One thing I will mention while we're here, Robbie talked about the updated signs for this election, the permanent absentee ballot mailing list opt-out sign. If a voter ever says, I don't know why I keep getting these ballots, it's possible that they registered in the past or signed up to receive absentee ballots in every election, and they forgot that or they didn't realize that. So there is a form that they can complete to opt out of that list if that's something that comes up in your precinct. Moving on to when voters actually are voting provisionally, a reminder of the provisional envelope. This has not changed since November, but since there's there are a lot of folks serving in this capacity for the first time, I'm going to walk through it either way. The provisional envelope, where the voter is inserting their provisional ballot, has two sides to it. So one side is for same-day registration ballots or provisional ballots. It is marked as SDR, and that's also known as reason code number 1. Whenever you hear me say reason code, that's referring to reasons that voters are voting provisionally. The reverse side of the envelope is for any other non-SDR reason, which in practice is going to be an absentee reason or the voter is marked as already voted. But any other non-SDR reason uses this other side. You can see some space on the envelope at the top reserved for office use. That's for our internal processes. Once we receive back all the provisional envelopes, you can leave that section blank. It's important that the voter completes the correct side of the provisional envelope pertaining to their situation. In this case, in this circumstance, it's fairly straightforward. You have one side entirely for one entire reason, and that's SDRs. The other side is everything else. In the bottom left, in the box that's marked for election officer use, which we're going to zoom in on later, that's where you mark off what that reason is. So just remember that this is a two-sided envelope. You can see it's one envelope, has both sides. You're going to have the voter only complete one of those sides, whichever their situation may be. Here's an example of both of these sides filled out completely. On the left, we have an example of an SDR voter. On the right, we have an example of a voter who's did not bring their absentee ballot to surrender. And they've filled out the envelope entirely with all the information that's required of them. The envelope has many required fields that the voter must complete and several optional fields such as email, phone number, that sort of thing. Everything on the envelope is marked with an asterisk that the voter must complete. There are many fields that are marked without an asterisk. In the bottom, the voter must also sign and date. And there's a section for you as the election officer to complete when issuing that provisional ballot. And then you'll also put any comments and sign there. The thing about the provisional envelope is that it's kind of dense. There's kind of a lot going on. What we have is the provisional overlays for you. These are plastic one-sheet handouts that we give to that we send out to you. And it's going to help you ensure that all sections that are required of the provisional envelope are completed by the voter. There's one for each side. You'll lay it on top of the envelope, and it's going to highlight the things that would be otherwise material omissions for the voter. That is, these things we want to make sure that the voter completes entirely. So now with these overlays on top of the envelope, it sort of hides all of that extra noise, all of the non-required sections and all of the empty space, and focuses you on just the sections that are required by the voter. When you put the overlay onto the envelope, you'll still have to use your eyes to check. You'll still have to look at it and determine, did the voter fill out all of the required information? Did they put their date of birth, or did they put today's date? Did they leave a section blank? And then if there is any omission, you would remove it and then have the voter correct that omission. Or if they totally wrote the wrong thing, you could issue them a new provisional envelope to start back over. There are a lot of things that are easy to miss. And so this overlay sort of hides all that and focuses you on just these required sections with those asterisks. And then also on your voter referral worksheet, when you're walking through the step-by-step checklist, there's a step that asks you to use this overlay to check and lists out what those requirements are. There's also a step where a second election officer takes a look at the provisional envelope to make sure we've given that voter the best chance of their provisional being counted. That is, they've filled out every required section of the envelope. That second officer, whoever it is, can also use this provisional overlay to look at a glance if anything jumps out. I'm going to talk about a couple of common mistakes here. One is in question 3 on the SDR side of the provisional envelope. This is a mistake from voters that we see often. The provisional application or the provisional envelope requires the voter to fill in or write in a lot of their personal information, and then they'll fill in and get to box 3, and box 3 has check boxes. And so as the voter is writing things in, it's easy to just skip down to the signature line. Section 3 is very important. It is, have you been convicted of a felony or judged mentally incapacitated and disqualified to vote? The voter must answer this question. They must make a selection in that first set of checkboxes, either yes or no. Commonly, people will answer no, and if that's how they answered, that's how they answered. But if they answered yes, then they must make a checkbox selection in that second line, either yes or no. So this block is not complete unless the voter has filled out no in that first box, or if they filled out yes, they filled out that second set of checkboxes. Your overlay just highlights over the no on that because it's what we find to be the most common answer. But if you see that blank, you'll remove it. Like I said earlier, you'll remove it and take another closer look and see if they've answered yes and yes, or yes and something else on that, or yes and no on that second line, or if they just totally forgot to answer that box, because that's really what we see as voters forget to answer that one. So I want to point that out to you. There are many other mistakes that voters can make. You know, it's a form for them to fill out, but this is a pattern that we see that we want to correct, or that we want to at least clue you in on, so you can be on the lookout for it. Another mistake that we want to point out as a common mistake is on the election officer side, and that's reason code number 6 on the non-SDR side of the provisional envelope. Reason code 6, you can see there is just other. And what I'll say here is reason code 6 other is actually very rare. Sometimes reason code number 6 gets used as a catch-all when you're not exactly sure what the provisional situation is. And in almost every circumstance, another situation would apply. The voter referral worksheet and the provisional log have a reminder to give our office a call if you're ever about to issue a reason code number 6, because in most of these circumstances, there is another situation that would otherwise apply. We just need to work through to that answer. If the voter has insisted on voting in the wrong precinct, there's also a spot for you to mention that, because like I said, a voter must vote in the precinct where they live if they're doing an SDR, which is something that you're going to work out with them. When it comes to reason code number 6 other, it's really one of those things that, you know, the side of the envelope says other reasons, but it's often going to be the ones above that. Something that we see a lot is a voter will say, well, I just registered 4 days ago, 5 days ago at the DMV, so I don't understand why it's not showing me on the poll book. And you might think initially, oh, that's a good point. Well, I guess there must have been just some error. Let's do a reason code number 6 other, because I don't know why that's happening. Take a step back, because 21 days before each election, there's a freeze on voters registering or updating their registration. We call it the close of books. So if a voter registers to vote or puts in a voter registration application in the 3 weeks before an election, that's fine. It's just going to be held until after the election to be processed. So if a voter says they went to the DMV a week ago, it would not show on the e-poll book, because it's during that period where no changes can be made. So to that end, if you see a voter who is not on your poll book, well, they're not registered, they would do an SDR. And then eventually when the books reopen and their application comes through, it would just be treated as a duplicate. So I just want to mention that that's something that we see in the conversation with the voter. You can get confused or turned around about what the voter's story or situation is. I just want to distill it down and say, if a voter is not on that poll book, that's a same day registration, regardless of if they did or didn't submit an application. But we can always look them up. We have access to what we receive from the DMV. If you give our voter support line a call, we can also look up this ancillary information to confirm that voter situation. So if you ever have any questions, I'll reaffirm here, give us a call. We're waiting to help you out. Now, once a provisional envelope is completed and the voter's ballot is voted and inserted into that provisional envelope, and you've logged that provisional envelope in the provisional ballot log on your admin tablet. This is the change from last election that we talked about earlier. That provisional goes into the provisional bag. There's a slot on the top that you'll just open up to insert it in, and that's where they stay throughout the day. Make sure you log it before you enter it, before you insert it into that bag, because you won't be able to open it up until polls close to check that you've logged it. One practice that I would recommend is as you are logging it into the provisional log, in the very top right corner in the election officer spot where you're writing down your precinct, make a check mark as a mental note to know that, yes, I logged this one, it's good to go. This will stay at the provisional table next to the chief or assistant chief. And in our testing for the capacity, this can fit several hundred provisionals. And we don't expect anybody to have that many in this election or any election except a very large presidential election. So you should be fine on capacity. You will only open this during closing procedures, which we'll talk about later on. Throughout the day, provisional ballots just get inserted by you, the chief or assistant chief, into the slot on the top. So having talked through some generalities with respect to non-routine and provisional voters and some important points to remember, I'm going to talk about that one resource that we mentioned earlier, the voter referral worksheet, which, as Ravi mentioned, we updated slightly from November after going through a lot of feedback and the way that it was used in all of our precincts and trying to optimize for same-day registration voters. As I mentioned, the vast majority of our provisionals tend to be, or at least in the last election, were same-day registrations. So we're going to show you how this form has been updated to help get you to that answer quicker and help that voter quicker. But also there's a lot of you who may not have used this form on this webinar. So I'm going to walk through it in detail as we go through each section and how this form is going to be helpful to you to work through non-routine voters who may end up becoming a provisional. So this form has two sides. The front side is for the chief and assistant chief to fill out. And it looks kind of dense, but there are really 4 sections, and you're only going to be using one of those 4 at any given moment, depending on the voter's circumstance, which I'll talk about in a moment. And this form walks you through the considerations or the information that you need to consider when determining whether or not to issue this voter a provisional ballot. And it lets you have a place to write down any information. Let's say you're doing a moving condition problem and you need to write down their addresses and that address information. This place gives you a place, this form gives you a place to write down that information you need and also sort of memorialize your decision so that you can remember or you can move forward, not having to forget which reason this voter is voting provisionally, because as you can see on the backside, you mark off what reason it is before you proceed with the provisional checklist. The checklist on the backside ordinarily would be for the provisional specialist. As we mentioned, very few precincts in this election will have a provisional specialist. So like I said before, this would also be done by the chief or the assistant chief. Now in your precinct, you may choose to have the chief do one and the assistant chief do the other, or perhaps have one take care of all of that and the other perform the double check. That's sort of up to you for whatever makes the most sense for your precinct. Either way, the chief or the assistant chief is responsible for all of these steps, including sitting down with the voter, going through the provisional envelope, entering it into the provisional log, making sure it's been fully completed, giving the voter their notice, and really that entire 12-step checklist that each voter needs to go through. That's going to keep you on track and make sure that each provisional voter gets the attention and care that they need, and that we've given them the best chance of having their ballot be counted by our electoral board by reconciling and checking everything for omissions and just making sure the process is completed. So this decision-making form becomes a checklist on the backside when you proceed to a provisional. Not all will be provisionals. If you're using this form to work through a situation, let's say it's an absentee surrendered or the voter doesn't need to vote provisionally, that's fine. You just wouldn't proceed to this checklist. So we're going to zoom into that front side of the form and tell you when you're going to use this to help break it down for you. As we mentioned earlier, there are a few changes here, so I'll try to be as brief as possible to at least go through this form. It's also available in your Chief's Notebook, which is also on the election officer portal right now, and you'll receive next week. But either way, there are 4 situations, and they're pretty straightforward. The voter has an absentee status on your poll book. The voter is marked as already voted. The voter is not on your poll book or is moved, or you're unsure. So let's go into that first situation. The voter has an absentee status on the poll book. As you can see, there's not really much you have to record. This just walks you through this situation that the voter may have. They are marked with an absentee status, and if that's issued, they either brought it with them or they didn't bring it with them. As I talked about in the last section, if they brought it with them, that would be an absentee surrender. And this refers you to the procedures for that, which is in what if number 19. As I said, this form and many of our materials try to bring together all of your resources so that you can refer to detailed instructions or a step-by-step as you find the easiest to work through situations. If you are finding that absentee surrenders are going fine and you don't need this checklist for all of them, you can see there it says after the first one, you don't need to keep going with this one. That's the only circumstance where you wouldn't need to proceed. But if they don't have that absentee ballot with them, well, that's a provisional ballot with reason code number 4, and then you'll flip to the backside to proceed with a provisional. Any other absentee status would have them vote a provisional with reason code number 5, because that means they've already returned their absentee ballot. And when I say absentee status, as I talked about before, you can read that status on the e-poll book. It's going to give you this same information. We're just trying to put it into the checklist so you can check what you're doing for that voter and use your provisional checklist if they do have to vote provisionally. So a few changes there, really no changes there from the last election. Section B is for if the voter is marked as already voted. We've moved this up towards the top, but still it's the same workflow. If the voter is marked as already voted, you're going to make sure that you've looked up the correct voter, that the check-in table didn't accidentally look up the wrong person. But once you've confirmed that status, their option is to vote a provisional ballot with reason code number 5, being that the voter has already voted, and you flip to the backside and proceed there. So that's a pretty easy one. Section C, though, is where we've made a change. And so I'll walk through that. We're still trying to help voters do a same-day registration or work through their moving conditions. So if a voter is not on your poll book, you're going to double check that by doing an advanced search and verify that they're not listed. And then you're going to use the precinct and address lookup tool, the PAL app, on your admin tablet to look up their address and see what precinct it's in. And this gives you a place to write down that precinct and congressional district information and gives you a decision point there. If the voter lives in this precinct and they're eligible to do an SDR, great, you can proceed with that and mark that. Otherwise, if they don't live in your precinct or if they've moved, you would proceed to the next section, which I'll go over after this. Let's focus right now on a straightforward and simple SDR. If a voter has shown up to the right place to do an SDR and they can vote where they're standing, where they've shown up on election day, that's what we want to help them with. So let's say for this example that I'm going to talk about, we're going to go over to the precinct and address lookup tool, and the voter says that they live at 6201 Sandstone Way in Clifton. Here's an example of what you'd see on the PAL app that says their precinct, their congressional district, and their polling place. You would confirm that that is your precinct, and you write that on the referral worksheet. Something I'm going to mention here briefly while we're talking about the PAL app is what it says there at the top on co-located precincts. For the 5th or so of you who are chiefs or assistant chiefs at co-located precincts, we have added the ability for you to see whether or not a precinct corresponding to an address is a co-located precinct. So in this example, I'm going to be the chief of 849 Newgate North, which is a co-located precinct. As a brief aside, the other co-located precinct here in Newgate South, their label there is not yellow as mine is. Their label would be green. So as you're looking at voters throughout the day, you would see yellow, 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 green. Wait a second. I need to double check that this voter is on the right side of the co-located precinct. Something that's really heartbreaking for us here in this office is when the voter's shown up to the right polling place, but they didn't make it to the right side of the co-located precinct. And a voter has to vote in the precinct that's assigned to their address. So this is one improvement on the voter on the precinct and address lookup app that's going to help the precincts with that are co-located. Now, if you're not in a co-located precinct, don't worry about that. That label won't appear. I just wanted to explain a little bit more about this app and tell you that there are some features there. We also have the ability to look up addresses that aren't in Fairfax County, which is a nice bonus from my neighborhood. It can tell you if it's in another jurisdiction. Or for those of you who are in Fort Belvoir, it's also got additional addresses that we weren't able to look up in my neighborhood. But that's a brief aside. This is an example of what it would look like for a voter who's at 6201 Sandstone Way in Clifton. And for this example, I'm the chief in 849 Newgate North. So if we look at the voter referral worksheet, I write down that address and I write down that information, precinct 849, and that was congressional district 11, in case I need that for later. Like I said, for this example, I'm that chief, I'm in 849, the voter's shown up to the right place and they weren't on my poll book. Great, the voter lives in this precinct. I'm going to proceed to issue an SDR provisional ballot and flip to the backside. That's going to be your bread and butter situation where voters, we need to find that they're in the right place, or if they've shown up and they've given you the address where they live. That's going to be your starting point, the address where they live. put into box C, even if they've moved. Now, if they have moved, we're going to walk through how we would work through a moving condition. That would be box C2. So I'm going to switch gears briefly here. Let's say I'm still the chief of 849 Newgate North, and I have a voter come in and this is their current address, and I've looked it up in the PAL app, and it's at precinct 132 in Congressional District 11. So the voter's given me their current address. It's not in my precinct. They can't do an SDR. That's when I continue into box C2 below, because I need to get more information from them to potentially work through a moving condition. This is a specific example. Every voter is going to be a little bit different. But in this situation, I would proceed with the address that if they've moved from an address on my poll book, I would write down that address. So for this example, the voter's former address was in my precinct. My check-in officers have sent me this voter because their address did not match what was on the poll book. I've checked their new address. They can't do an SDR because it's not in my precinct. So now we need some more information. So if we look at box C2, and again, this is an example. I'm kind of walking through a quick example. In this situation, in actuality, in practice, you would have to get this example from the voter or this information from the voter. It would be a conversation with the voter. So forgive me, I'm kind of skipping through some steps of the process because it's an interaction with the voter. But in this case, I see on the e-poll book, when I look them up, that they are on the e-poll book still in precinct 849, which as we said is my precinct. And I need one more piece of information to walk through the moving conditions. And that's when the voter moved, which was, in this case, totally made up example, March 5th, 2025. So I'm going to work through the voter's situation. I have their old address, their new address, and we refer to the moving conditions. In your Chief's notebook, you have this chart. You also have a handout of this chart. To work through this, there's a grid where you can walk through where did the voter move and how far did they move, and a flow chart if that's easier for you to think through. In this situation, I know it's tough because we just moved away from the slide, but I'm the chief of 849 Newgate North. The voter used to live in that precinct, but now they don't. They now live in precinct 132, but they moved earlier this year. This is when I need to look at the moving conditions, which are detailed in your chief's notebook, and determine what options can we offer to this voter. In this specific circumstance, like I said, every voter, you have to think about the facts pertaining to them and work through what are going to be their options. Like we mentioned, this voter can't do an SDR because they no longer live in my precinct, but because they've moved within the same congressional district, and it was a recent move, we can see I'm kind of shortcutting here the decision-making processes I'm referring to these materials in my precinct. We can see that they fall on that first row of the moving conditions chart. Or you take a look at that flow chart, they are able to vote in the old precinct where they're registered, which would be mine, 849 Newgate North. Great, I can actually have them vote here. We don't need to send them to precinct 132 Monument. And that's all dependent on the facts specific to that voter. Where did they move and how far did they move? We got here because we weren't able to do an SDR. That was our first test. Were we able to proceed with that and have the voter vote where they were voting with an SDR? We'll vote with an SDR where they were standing. The answer was no. So we had to gain more information with the moving conditions. We worked through the problem, and we find that if we proceed to continue with that voter referral worksheet, this voter can still vote in their old precinct. They just have to fill out a new voter registration application. So here's an example of what that voter referral worksheet looks like completed. I've gotten all the information I've needed. I've referred to my resources, and I've made the decision that I'm issuing that this voter is still eligible to vote in this precinct. I'm going to issue them required paperwork, like I said, in this circumstance, a voter registration application, which is listed in the what ifs in your chief's notebook. And then we can check the voter in. This isn't going to be the case for all voters, of course. This is just a specific scenario of moving conditions. So if you got confused by that or got lost through any of that, that's okay. I was kind of going pretty fast through an example of a voter. We also have the chief open house coming up next week. You can come in and ask any questions of moving conditions voters. And we also have some chief workshops coming up where you can still come in and practice this. But if you're unsure, we have a box for that on the voter referral worksheet. If you're not sure what you need to do for any voter, let's say they have a prompt on the e-poll book that you've never seen before, that's the first time you're seeing it that day. Let's say they have a complicated situation where they've done several things and you're not sure what's the straightforward solution for them. Let's say they have, you're working through a moving conditions and it's complicated. That last one was a little bit complicated. you can give us a call. Our office is waiting, ready to help, waiting and eager to help you through these situations. Don't feel afraid. It's not going to be a point against you. We're waiting and ready to help you. And on your voter referral worksheet, you have a spot to write down what's going to be the best option for that voter. So if you need to give us a call, feel free. We have a voter support line ready. We can do look up information that's not available to you in the precinct, such as that voter's current registration or prior registration record, or if they've had any transactions at the DMV for their voter registration. Or really honestly, if there's any time you need procedural help or help with a voter, you can give us a call and we'll walk you through it. There's no shame in it. Those are the 4 sections on the front of the voter referral worksheet. Moving to the back, we're gonna get a little bit easier here. The back just has a spot to mark what provisional is this voter voting, what provisional reason code are we using for this voter if they are indeed voting a provisional ballot. And then we get to the checklist that will be completed in general elections by the provisional specialist, in this election by the chief or the assistant chief. Here's an example of that, what that looks like after you've sat down with the voter and had them vote their provisional. You can see it's got a number of check boxes, but these are all the things that you already have to do with the voter. You start from the process from start to finish. You do your section of the provisional envelope. The voter does their section of the provisional envelope. You check that they've completed all the required fields and you use the overlay. Another election officer double checks for you. The voter votes their ballot, inserts it in the envelope. They get their notice, they get their I voted sticker. You put in the provisional log and you put in the provisional bag. It's easy to say in just a couple of words, but that's a multi-step process. So as you're going through that with the voter, shouldn't take too long, couple of minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on working through that situation, 5 to 15 minutes. But this gives you a step to make sure you're on task and helping that voter out. Once you have a completed voter referral worksheet, it does not go into the provisional envelope. Something I want to say is very important. The only thing that goes in the provisional envelope is the provisional ballot itself. Completed voter referral worksheets, like any other voter document, such as a registration application or an affirmation of eligibility, these all go in envelope number 8. So however many you have throughout the day, you can just go ahead and put them into envelope number 8. This is a tool and a worksheet to keep you on track with provisional voters or voters who may end up becoming provisional and let you record the information that you need for them, but they don't go with the provisional, they go into envelope number 8. So there's a lot of detail walking through the provisional process, non-routine voters, and the voter referral worksheet, and how it all kind of links together with a couple of specific examples, specifically with an SDR voter and a moving conditions voter. I'm going to take a step back here and open up a poll here with Gretchen for a knowledge check.
Yes, thank you, Sean. And so we're going to go ahead with knowledge check 3. I'll launch that for on your screens now. And the question is, what resources do you have to help process non-routine voters on election day? You guys are excellent. No disagreement here I'm seeing. Your options are the Chief's Notebook, the voter referral worksheet, prompts on the poll book, calls to the office, and all of the above.
Rach, is this the first time we're going to get 100% correct response rate on every question, on a question?
We will be very, very close, I think.
Remember, we want to help you out with these. We're giving you all these tools to help you out.
Yes, the answer is all of the above. So we have a ton of resources at your disposal. We are here to help however we can. We've got tons of, we've got the worksheet, we've got the prompts, we've got everything you need. So whenever, but if you're ever in doubt, give us a call and we are happy to help you out and make sure the non-routine voter is handled appropriately.
So having worked through non-routine voters, which is, like I mentioned, one of the most important tasks for chiefs and assistant chiefs is to work through non-routine and provisional voters. There's another very important task that's incumbent upon the chief and the assistant chief, and that's to organize and manage closing your precinct. I'm going to pass on over to Jean here to talk about some considerations there and some tips and tricks and some general reminders.
Thanks, Sean. Closing the polls is actually my favorite part of the day. I know I might be a glutton for punishment there. So the polls are now closed. The last voter has left the room. Get a drink of water, take some deep breaths. You've got this, and just slow down. You've got checklists for everything to make sure it will all get done. So now we're ready to begin closing the polls. As Ravi mentioned, you should have distributed the red closing guides no later than 5 o'clock. This gives everybody time to familiarize themselves with the closing tasks that you assign them when you made your election day plan for who does what. The closing the polls section of the notebook has a chief's closing checklist for your specific responsibilities as chief. Much of that involves delegating and then verifying that those tasks were completed. You have read closing guides for everything that you can possibly think of. And we can't emphasize enough how important it is to hand these out and verify that tasks are done correctly. There's even little check boxes on all the closing guides. Give everybody a pen and have them literally check off the boxes. We're not going to reuse these next election, so by all means, mark them up. Wait until all voters have voted and left the voting room before starting your closing procedures. If you have anybody in line at 7 p.m., not likely this election, send 2 officers out to the end of the line. And then if any voters show up after 7, they can politely inform them that the polls are now closed. The closing numbers worksheet is going to be floating around the room as the various officers do their tasks. This is a form that the election officers use to record numbers all in one place as they work through their checklists. So, one person may have it and someone else may need it. That's okay. Just move it around. The form needs to be completely filled out in order to do the SOR. So if any part of this form comes back to you blank or incomplete, hand it back to the team responsible for filling it out. Don't let people get off without finishing their specific tasks. Closing the scanners is something that is best done in a particular order. In a busy election, when you're using both of your scanners, you want to close the one with the highest public count first. You close them one at a time so that you can use the other one as a backup in case something goes wrong. This is super important. If something went wrong, you would be there for at least a couple more hours. So the closing officers are going to pull USB flash drives, but they need to make sure they wait to do that until the scanner is completely shut down. The little power light is off. It's all in their guide. If they're in too big of a hurry and they pull those USB flash drives too soon, the data on them can be corrupted, just like crashing the hard drive on your computer. All the ballots would have to be rescanned on the other machine. And if you had already closed that other machine, now you're kind of up a creek. If you have any machine issues during closing, don't guess. Call the tech support number on the inside cover of your chief's notebook. They'll walk you through whatever needs to be done or dispatch a rover to help you. The closing officers for the scanner will need to look at the tapes to write down 3 numbers on the closing numbers worksheet. 1, the public count, 2, the total standard ballot sheets, and 3, the total number of express vote cards. These are all in one place, and that is in the ballot status account and report. It's the first report at the very top of the closing tape. But what's a standard ballot sheet? Let me show you on the next slide. And this is simply a regular ballot. That's just a terminology thing. It's a little awkward, but a standard ballot sheet is a regular paper ballot. Express vote cards are just that, though we do refer to them as ballot cards in training. It just so happens on the tape, it prints as express vote card. So again, they're going to write down 3 numbers, and that is the public count, the total standard ballot sheets, and the express vote cards. So let's talk some more about these flash drives. There are 4 flash drives. Okay, let's talk about the scanner team. They've followed their checklist. They've pulled 2 drives from each scanner, a primary drive with a purple label and a backup drive with a white label. So they're going to give you a total of 4 drives. We've color-coded these for you so to make it's really easy to know where they're going to go. The 2 drives with purple labels go in the purple pouch, And you can see there that it is sealed with a zip tie seal. The 2 drives with white labels go in the white envelope number 7 to be stored at the courthouse. This is a very important step in closing. We don't want to see any empty envelopes number 7 or purple pouches that have a mix of white and purple drives. Take the extra minute to double check that the right drives went into the right places. Another note about the provisional bag, as we mentioned earlier, at the end of the night, you're going to open this bag, take out all the provisional envelopes and SDR envelopes, and you're going to sort them into 2 piles, an SDR pile, a non-SDR pile, and going to put those into the envelopes 1A, the appropriate one, and record the numbers, the total count, on the closing numbers worksheet. Eventually, that'll make its way to the SOR. The collector officers are the ones who need these envelopes. The collector officers are usually pretty eager to get going, but again, take the time to make sure that they have everything that they should. There should be a trip block bag with any absentee ballots that you've received in your Dropbox. If you're in a co-located precinct and you've shared your Dropbox, one of you is going to put all of your envelopes in the trip block. The other precinct is still going to go through the process of filling out the form and putting it inside and sealing it, but it's going to record 0. So there's still going to be 2 bags for a co-located precinct. So getting back to a regular precinct, which is most of you, you will have the trip block bag with the form and the ballots, the purple pouch with 2 flash drives with purple labels, and 2 large green envelopes. Co-located will have double what you see here on the screen. In addition to other materials, you're going to be bringing back all the ballots on election night. Voted ballots are going to be returned in a box number 3 with you can see the big yellow label on the top of that. Blank ballots, those are going to be returned in a box number 6. We give you brand new boxes to use for the number 3. For the number 6, just reuse the boxes that the ballots were delivered in your cage. But don't assemble more boxes than you need, and you should be able to get all your ballots into 1 box. Now you're at the point where it's time to start working on the SOR. You've got a completed closing numbers worksheet. This is not a scary process at all. We've given you so many tools now to make this process super painless. So take the closing numbers worksheet, plug that in to the SOR helper tool that is on your admin tablet. It's going to let you know if all of your math is good or if something doesn't look right, then you can go back and try to figure out what the problem was. Most likely somebody wrote down a number incorrectly, and it's generally solvable that way. If you get stuck on either the SOR helper or the SOR itself, give us a call. Don't wait for your rover, anything like that. We've got people here who are experts in this. We can walk you through it. This is the most important document of the day. So please make sure that both sides of both SORs are completely filled out. There should be no blank boxes. If something's a 0, you can write 0 or draw a line horizontally, and take another look at them before you put it in envelope number 2. Make sure that everybody has printed and signed their name. And if you'd like some practice with the SOR, you can do that at the Chief Open House. On the back of the SOR, we ask you to reconcile sections 5 and section 6. Section 5 is how many ballots did you receive at the beginning of the day? Section 6 is how did you use all those ballots as you went through the day for various purposes, not just voting, but spoils, provisionals, SDRs, things like that. If these don't match, just like on the front of the SOR, we give you a couple of pre-populated reasons. For example, there were more or less than 200 ballots in one package. There might have been a spoiled express vote card, a ballot marking device card. Another thing that sometimes happens is people will miscount the number of ballots in open packages. So you've opened your last pack of 200 for the day. Somebody only counted 148 instead of 149. It's just like at the beginning of the day when you open ballots, it's a good idea to have someone else double check that count for you. Envelope number 7 has one other important function besides holding the flash drives with white labels, and that is we have to record some information on the back. And you take this directly off of the machine certification form. It's literally, I mean, if we could do a copy and paste here, we would. But you're going to copy from the ballots, from the machine certification form. You're going to copy the serial number of each of your scanners, the opening and closing, seal numbers, protected count, and public count. So there's no math here, there's no calculations. It's just copying what's on the machine cert form, making sure that you write it on the back of envelope 7, and once more, double checking that there are 2 USB flash drives inside there that have white labels. The election officer team would be so happy if you could make sure that there are no missing signatures in your precinct. There are, unfortunately, too many times when officers forget to sign things. So we've got even a checklist for this. Like I said, there is a checklist for literally everything you can do. So someone should be given this and ask them to go around and make sure that all these things are signed. And then you as the chief, or it could be the assistant chief, should also double check and make sure that everything is signed. Resist the temptation, though, to pre-sign forms and labels during the day. Someone could end up having to leave due to illness, something like that. You just never pre-sign any form. All right, it's time to load your car. You're going to return 5 things to your depot, the same place where you picked everything up the day before. There's your black kit, the e-poll books in a cardboard banker's box, all number 3 boxes, all number 6 boxes, and 1 sheet of paper, the chief supply return form. Please fill this out and sign it. This is your chain of custody form. You're telling us how many of each of these things that you're bringing back, and then we're signing it in when we receive it at the depot. And then before you leave, call or text your rover to let them know that you are going dark, that you're leaving your polling place. They can't go home until all the precincts on their route leave. So that's why they want to hear from you. And again, if you run into any issues during closing, we're here on the general support line. Give us a call and we'll make sure we get you settled up here. And with that, we're going to do our final knowledge check.
Thanks, Jean. We'll go ahead and launch our knowledge check number 4 for you all. And our question is, where do you find all the numbers needed for the statement of results through the SOR? Your options are check each piece of equipment yourself, ask each election officer from the closing numbers worksheet, or option D, I don't need to complete the SOR. Give you a little bit of a hint, it's not that one. You do need to complete the SOR. Could not emphasize that part enough.
I was about to say, I hope no one selects option D. Gretchen, I think this is going to beat the earlier question. I think this one might be the one where we get the most people answering it correctly.
Trending that way. Yep. Give you guys a couple more minutes or moments to get going.
If anything, I think, Gretchen, I think some of the options here are ways that this could have been done in the past, but we've now made it simpler and easier for chiefs and assistant chiefs. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yes, it looks like you guys are just about answered and you've got the right answer, C, from the closing numbers worksheet. And so like Ravi mentioned, this is something that we designed to make the closing process easier for you. It collects all the information you need for closing in one spot. Every officer who's working on a closing task is directed to go write that information on the worksheet at the right time. And so then you, as the chief and the assistant chief, can take that worksheet and use that to complete your SOR. And with that, we're going to turn it to Ravi for some final reminders.
Thank you, Gretchen. All right, well, most important, now that we've completed the main portion of the briefing, we want to make sure we get you all sworn in. So please raise your right hand and repeat with me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will perform the duties for this election according to law and the best of my ability, and that I will studiously endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, and abuse in conducting this election. On behalf of the General Registrar and the Electoral Board, you are now sworn in for this election. As a very important reminder, we can't give you credit for this briefing until you complete the briefing quiz. We're going to email all of you watching live today an email later today with the link to the quiz to receive credit. There are some questions in that quiz that will verify that you've paid attention to the content and updates shared in this briefing, and make sure to complete that quiz no later than this Friday, June 6th. All right, now we want to answer your questions. We've received many, many questions through the question and answer function in Zoom, and we've been answering many of them in written form. There's a number of great questions that we want to share with everyone, and we're going to go through those. But if you have a question that you haven't yet asked, feel free to go ahead and submit it using the Q&A feature, and we'll get to those. For any questions that we're not able to answer live during this briefing, we'll include them in our frequently asked questions that we post in the portal. And if you ever have a question that you have not yet otherwise received the answer to, please remember, you can always contact us by emailing us at electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov or call us at 703-324-4735. That's our main number before Election Day, and that's also the general support line on Election Day. So if there's anything that we have covered today, whether that's something to do before you open the polls, whether it's the voter referral worksheet, whether it's a question during closing procedures, you're not sure how to fill out your SOR, give us a call. Don't just guess at it. We're more than happy to help walk you through it and get you to the right place. Now, we're fortunate to be joined by many of our office staff who are going to help answer many of the questions you've submitted today. We have our Deputy Director of Elections and Deputy General Registrar, Cheryl Jones, our IT Manager, Cord Whitehouse, our Communications Division Chief, Sean Stewart, our Voter Services and Same-Day Registration Manager, Bushra Ardalan, our Voting Equipment and Logistics Manager, Tyrone Allen. We have a new election supplies coordinator. This is the person who took Kay's shoes. This is Justin Knairnschild, who's joined us from the Alexandria Elections Office. We have our clerk to the Electoral Board and polling place liaison, Beth Methvessel. We have our deputy registrar for early voting satellites, Florence Brown. And another new addition, we have our deputy registrar for absentee voting, Ben Howard, who's recently joined us from the Arlington Elections Office. So it's great that we have some new faces that'll be sharing some updates with answering your questions here. Before we go to Flo and Ben to give you an update on early voting and absentee mail respectively, Gretchen, I believe you have an update you'd like to share with our chiefs and assistant chiefs.
Yes, I had something I'd like to share with you all regarding staffing for the election officer team. Unfortunately, this is my last week here in the Office of Elections in Fairfax County. I am transitioning into a new role in the City of Alexandria Election Office, so not too far, as their Assistant Elections Manager. So I'll be in place before the June election over there. So I wanted to thank you. I really have loved every moment of working here at the Office of Elections. I've learned so much as the election officer manager, and it's been a privilege to work with each of you and serve alongside you. So thank you very much for serving as an election officer, and it's really meant a lot to get to work with each and every one of you. It's definitely a bittersweet opportunity, but I'm just around the corner in Alexandria, so I won't be far. Thank you all.
Thank you, Gretchen. While we will certainly miss you after this election, if I'm not mistaken, you will be at our chief open house next Tuesday for anyone that wants to stop by and say hi. Is that right?
I will be there. My last day is actually on Tuesday the 10th, so I was able to squeeze that in so I could come to the open house. So definitely stop by and say hi. I'd love to see you all.
Thanks, Gretchen. Let's turn now to Flo and Ben for some updates on early voting and absentee mail. Flo, do you have an update for us?
I do. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ravi. So as you might imagine, it's been a little bit slow out there in the satellites so far. We have had, as of yesterday, June 2nd, we haven't quite crossed 2,000 votes yet. So we're hopeful that with our opening this coming Saturday of an additional 13 locations, along with the 3 that are already open, so we'll have a total of 16 open this weekend, we're hoping to see a little bit more business. And I just wanted to remind all of you, if you haven't voted yet, please come and see us. Again, we have 13 locations opening this coming Saturday. We'll be open 9 to 5. Our last day of early voting is Saturday, June 14th. And again, on that Saturday, we're open 9 to 5. So please come and see us.
Great, thank you, Flo. Let's turn to Ben Howard. Ben, what do you have for us as relates to absentee mail for this election?
Hey folks, so I'm Ben Howard. I am the new absentee voting manager. This is day 11 on the job for me, replacing Sean as he's going to be the communications division chief, as most of you just saw on the list on the previous slide. Absentee is not quite as slow as early voting, but we're similarly slow. We've gotten back about 11,000 ballots so far out of the 46 and change that have been mailed. Not entirely sure what our expectation is to finish this with absentee, but probably a little more right around the 20,000 mark. We'll see. If you have any questions or anything, we're more than welcome to reach out to me, reach out to Ravi, let them know. I know y'all probably won't see my face very often. I work in the background and probably won't be doing this very often as well, but please let me know. I'm happy to be of assistance as I can.
Thank you very much, Ben. All right, with that, let's turn to lots of the questions that we've received so far. Jean and Susan, what questions do we have? I think they're first up for Gretchen, is that right?
That's correct. We've got lots of great questions from everyone, and we really appreciate this opportunity to be able to answer those for you. So Gretchen, someone is asking, I'm an assistant chief and I'm interested in serving as a chief. Do you still need chiefs?
Yes, that's a great question, and you are our new favorite. We absolutely are still looking for some chief officers for this election. We've had a number of cancellations just this past weekend. So if you're an assistant chief, you've already done the training, including this one, we would love for you to step up and take that extra leap into the chief role. So if that applies to whoever submitted this question and to anyone else who is listening, we would absolutely love to use you as a chief. Please email us at electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov, and we'll be in touch with next steps. Thank you so much.
Great. We have several more questions for you, Gretchen, so stay with us here. If an election officer has been trained as a provisional specialist, can the chief or assistant chief call on them for help during the day?
That's a great question. For this election, we are reserving that role for the chief and the assistant chief. So if there is a provisional specialist, unless they are designated on your roster as a provisional specialist, like in those small handful of precincts we have, we are going to reserve that role for the chief and the assistant chief. This is because we've got a number of updates for this election regarding the provisional process that Sean just went over, including the provisional bag and other things. And so we want to make sure that the only people who are handling provisionals are those who have completed that training. So if someone served in that role in November, that's great. We would love to use them potentially in that role in November. But for this election, we're going to leave that to the chiefs and the assistant chiefs.
All righty. Someone asked, I'm a chief from a small precinct. I've only got 5 officers. Can we have the people checking in voters hand the ballots to the voter directly instead of using those voter permit cards?
Another good question. The answer is no. We still want to have all officers use that ballot table. So if you've got 5 officers in the precinct, you'll have 1 election officer who would handle the check-in table, 1 who would do handle the ballot table, so they would be the one taking the voter permit card, exchanging that for the ballot. And the final regular election officer in your precinct would be managing the voting booth station and the scanner station. And so then you have the chief and the assistant chief who can perform the greater functions, who can float around to provide assistance for breaks or anything else. But your 3 officers in that precinct should be used in those 3 different capacities. It's really important that we keep that one separate to make sure that every officer is being issued, or sorry, every voter is being issued exactly 1 ballot.
Pivoting back to election officers, when will reserves be notified of their assignment?
Great question. So the answer depends on the type of reserve officer you are. Reserve officers are those who are on standby to fill in for some last minute cancellations. So if you're a reserve chief or reserve assistant chief, you're watching this briefing, so thank you. We're going to place you in a precinct soon within the next week or so you'll have a place to report to on election day. And so if there are no cancellations near you, you're going to stay in that precinct for election day and provide extra help to your chief and your assistant chief. We're putting you in precincts where you think you could be of the most use. If you are called to fill in for a cancellation, we'll let you know anytime, whenever that might be, anytime from now through election morning, there may be a cancellation and we'll move you over there to fill in for that need. For the regular reserve officers who are just filling in for standard election officer cancellations, they're going to be notified right around election day. So that might be the night before around 7 p.m. That could be the morning of at 7 a.m. As they're filling in for those last minute cancellations of people who didn't show up on election morning. So the reserve chiefs and reserve assistant chiefs will be parked in a precinct soon, and all the other reserve officers will get their assignment right before election day.
Okay. And one more question for Gretchen. If someone cannot attend the chief open house, how do they get their notebook? Can they get it the day before the election day? What other arrangements might there be?
Yes, if you're not able to attend the chief open house, you'll pick up your notebook during the Monday supply pickup. So that'll be in all of your final materials in your black kit. So the chief will pick it up there, and then as the assistant chief, you'll be able to get it from your assistant chief, from the chief when you go to do your Monday setup.
Righty. I'm going to hand the baton over to Susan to continue the questions.
Hey, everybody. So we have some questions for Sean about provisional process.
I presume that's this Sean, right?
Sean Rogers, yes. So the first question is, do I have to use the voter referral worksheet?
Sure, good question. The short answer is yes. The easy way to remember that is to take a look at the top of the voter referral worksheet, and it lists out those situations that would require it. That's if there's an absentee situation, they're marked as already voted, or there's an address or moving situation. So take a look at that, and if you're ever unsure, you can always start one and end up not needing it. That's just fine. We send you plenty. But the most important part of it's going to be also that provisional checklist on the back to keep you on track. So short answer, yes, just take a look and see what those situations are.
Okay, so during the provisional process, while the voter is there, is the voter supposed to stay with you the whole time? And who puts the ballot in the provisional bag?
Sure. I'll go in reverse order there. So for the question of who inserts the provisional ballot in its provisional envelope into the provisional bag, that's going to be the election officer helping out that voter. The provisional bag will be at your provisional table. The recommendation would be to put it on the floor because it's actually going to stand up quite tall. And the election officer goes ahead and inserts that as the last step in that process. Now for the voter, the last step for them is when they receive their provisional notice and their I voted sticker. That's the last action required of them. But if they want to stick around to see you log the provisional ballot and insert it, there's no problem with that. But they're not required to stay for that section. They have to do all of their completed sections and get their sticker and notice.
Super. So since we're putting our ballots into the bag during the day, how do you keep track of what ballots you have for the turnout survey?
Sure. So that's a good question. For provisional ballots, it's the SDR and the non-SDR provisional ballots. On the 3 turnout surveys throughout the day, we're going to ask you what your vote counts are, including those numbers. Now, knowing that you can't reopen the provisional bag throughout the day, once it's sealed for that day. You can't go back in there to count out anything if you forgot to log it or if you forgot to write it down. If you have those numbers available to submit to the turnout survey, great, go ahead. But if you don't have those numbers, it's going to be optional. So if it's helpful for you to keep a separate tally for knowing how many provisionals you've issued throughout the day, you can give us that number. But ultimately, if you don't have that number, it is optional as opposed to your regular turnout numbers. Those are required. I want to reemphasize the point there. Don't reopen that bag just to get those numbers or for any reason at all. Those are going to be optional if you happen to have them for the turnout survey.
Great, thanks, John. And I'm going to send it back to Jean.
All right, I'm going to hit up a whole lot of people here. First is Justin, our inventory and supplies manager. Question is, I always have trouble finding my admin tablet in the black kit. Got any ideas so that I don't waste so much time on Tuesday morning?
Yep, so the admin tablets will be going out in these Idaho bags. So these will have both of the tablets within them, and we'll try to keep this a little bit higher up on the piles of supplies that will be within that middle compartment within the black chief kits.
Justin, can you do us a favor and hold that really close to the camera? I think your blur settings make it so we can't see it.
Oh, let
It's
me
kind of a
change my
mesh
settings real
bag,
quick.
right? It's like a large gallon
Yes.
Ziploc bag that's made of mesh. There we go.
Yeah, Gene, you were muted, but I think I heard some
Thank
of the
you.
question where they will be
Right.
a variety of colors, but all of them will have this mesh material. So not all of them will be blue. We've got a variety of colors that we'll be using for those.
Wow, that's fabulous. Tyrone, when will the cage with the voting equipment be delivered to each precinct?
The deliveries started on Monday and they will continue through next week. Excuse me. A good question. I don't have a list in front of me for each precinct, but I can say that by Friday of next week, all of the precincts will have been delivered.
And Tyrone, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's by next Wednesday, right? Wednesday, June 11th, that the final delivery should be complete, barring any issues.
Yes, I
Okay.
think Thursday was their backup day, but
Okay.
the actual ending should take place on Wednesday.
And that also means that many precincts, because the deliveries have already started, will get it before then. So if you're a chief or
Yes.
assistant chief trying to schedule what time to meet with your polling place, verify the equipment's been delivered, check with your polling place contact, but it should be there before next
Yes,
Wednesday, by next Wednesday.
and I'd like to point out this is also in your portal. You can see this under the precinct page.
Once it is delivered.
Well, we've actually got the anticipated dates in there, so hopefully hopefully it's close. Cheryl, we have a couple of questions for you, and thank you, Tyrone. Much appreciated. Cheryl, if a voter fills out a provisional envelope, you give them another one. How do you account for that envelope that's going to be discarded, or what do we do with it?
Just write spoiled on it and put it in the number 8 envelope. That's it. If there's a simple mistake, maybe the person put 2025 as their birth year, or they misspelled their road or something, their street name, you can just scratch it out. Not you, the voter can just scratch it out and correct it. That's okay. But if they filled out the wrong side, or they put a P.O. box in for their address, or there's a big mistake, just spoil the whole thing and have them start over.
Good plan. Another question is, why do we need to transfer all those provisional ballots from the provisional bag into the envelopes 1A, SDR, and non-SDR? We've already got them in a bag. Why do they have to go into envelopes?
Well, it's a little bit the same reason that you take the ballots out of the ballot box and put them in seal them up in a box and put a label on them and sign your name. It's the same thing with the 1A envelope. You have to sign the back, you have to certify how many ballots are in that envelope, how many you received. And then when we get them back here, we're able to put them in bins, mail trays, and we sort them by precinct. And those envelopes stay in that 1A envelope for your precinct. That's their house. Once we review them and so forth, they go back in that envelope. And after the board has done its adjudication, then we'll take out the ones that have been approved and are going to be counted. The empties of those, after we've opened them, go back in that 1A envelope, and the ones that weren't open because for whatever reason those ballots couldn't be counted, those go back, those stay in the envelope. The envelope gets resealed with a seal with the electoral board signatures on it, and then we have to certify on the back of it how many were opened, how many were not opened, and then what that total is. And that total needs to equal what you wrote on there initially. This is a chain of custody process all the way through. So it's really important that you turn that envelope over and you fill out the back. It's also important that the SDRs go in the SDR envelope and the other ones go in the other envelope. This is because they're handled completely differently. We have the voter registration staff taking care of the SDRs because, of course, they deal with voter registration every day. And then we have another team of provisional or staff members who are trained to deal with the other kind of provisional ballots, and they're doing research on the other ones. So we keep, they're separate in our database. And so it's really important when we find them in the wrong envelopes, then we think, is this really an SDR or did they just fill out the wrong side? We're not really sure. And it causes a lot of extra work and consternation. So please be sure you get them in the right envelopes and that you fill out the back of the envelope. I could hold it up the way Sean did. Oh, can we see? Oh, it's the whole blurring thing. But there is a back to the envelope. Turn it over, please fill it out, sign it. You're certifying how many are in there, how many you received.
Appreciate all that information, Cheryl. Bushra, we have a question for you. How many same-day registrations did Fairfax County get in the presidential election? And how many do you expect that we'll get in this primary?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being frontline of Office of Election. And just for your information, we received 14,246 SDR same-day registration for November presidential election. And as I said, for your information again, we process all those same-day registration within 5 days. That is a deadline by Department of Election. For this election, since SDR started May 28th, until now, we have only 3 same-day registration, early voting. Probably, I guess, maybe 200 to 300 same-day registration for this election.
So, Bushra, that sounds like each precinct should prepare for maybe 1 to 5 on average per precinct. A relatively low number throughout the day.
Definitely, correct.
And can you repeat that number from the November 2024 presidential election? Because that's a huge number. You should shout it from the rooftops.
Yes, 14,246 same-day registration and was processed within 5 days.
And if I'm not missing, that's by far the most that any locality received in Virginia.
Yes,
So
the biggest number in Virginia. Correct.
So your new team did a fantastic job of processing those 5 business days. Thanks, Bushra.
Wonderful. Now we're going to move on to Sean Stewart. What are the rules for citizen journalists, people who may want to film voters entering and leaving the polling place?
Can I go back to Sean, the other Sean's question? Might be, I don't know, might be more interesting. Good morning, everybody here for one more minute. Sean Stewart here. So question, I'll answer it this way. The first thing I would suggest you do is take a look there in chapter 1. The elections administration team has put together a great preview page that gives you some very helpful information on do's and don'ts for media coming into the precinct. You're not going to see citizen journalists that are labeled there specifically, but if you've got somebody that's outside that 40-foot line, the reason you won't see it mentioned there, right, is that's where our jurisdiction lives, ends, begins, all the above. You want to make sure that a voter is not being hindered, not being bothered, certainly within that section, or certainly news media within the precinct, within the polling place area itself. If there's issues outside of that you've been made aware of, outside that 40-foot line with somebody filming in a public space, a voter, party campaigner, somebody that's handing out information beyond that, they're being bothered, anything that you can assess the situation, make sure it's not within that prohibited area. Beyond that, they'd have to reach out to the authorities. So just remember, take a good look at the jurisdiction we have there in the prohibited area with media coming into the polling place. Make sure you go through your best practices, let voters know and your staff know that media is coming in. Make sure nobody objects to being filmed or photographed, and just make sure you've got good coverage of the places that you can. And beyond that, we'll move it up the line as needed.
Appreciate that, Sean. I'd like to ask a question of Cord Whitehouse, our IT manager. Someone is concerned about the cell service in their precinct. Do you have any suggestions if the admin tablet seems to have difficulty connecting?
Yes, great question. So what I would say is my answer will vary depending on what location you're at. If you're at one of the school locations, we have the admin tablets programmed to connect to the school's Wi-Fi. So you could look for the little Wi-Fi fan symbol up in the top right-hand corner. If you're at a school and you don't see that symbol, then that might be time to call Tech Command and let us take a look for you, because it should automatically connect to that. If you're not at a school location, then you are going to have to rely on the built-in cellular connection on the tablet. That built-in connection, as we all know, will work in certain places, not in others. That's all kind of general depending on how close you are to a tower. Things you could do inside your individual location is you could try to make sure that you're near a wall that is an external wall to the outside, or specifically if you can get to a window that can see to the outside, that might increase your chance of getting signal. Since this might be a slower turnout election, there might even be the possibility you could step outside if need be and fill out a form and then come back in. If all else fails, then it would be going back to the paper processes and like calling in your turnout to the election officer team.
Great tips for Cell. All right, Beth, our polling place expert, we've got 2 questions for you.
Great. Let me add them.
All righty. First one is my polling place contact isn't responding to my calls or emails to arrange for a visit. What should I do?
If you are not having any success getting a hold of your facility contact, I would call the office and I will help you make that connection. That's the simplest answer. Don't continue to struggle with it. Just give me a call and we'll make sure that you make contact.
Awesome. And the second question is, can you give us some thoughts on co-located precincts, especially those who are going to share a voting room like a cafeteria or a gym? It sounds like there's a lot of opportunities for voters to get confused.
That's true. If a voter hasn't already been through the voting process with a co-located precinct, if they're brand new, perhaps they would be confused. I want to say a simple answer is that everything is pretty much separate. The only thing you're sharing in common is the parking lot and the building. So you do need to make sure that you have the appropriate amount of parking designated for each polling place. Just a best practice is to when you go with the chief to do your setup, of course you need to go together. Please make an arrangement with your facility so that both chiefs can do the setup on Monday at the same time. And I did serve as a chief of a co-located precinct. And one thing that I did that was helpful is we would choose which set of signs that we were going to do. So I would do the inside signs and the other chief would do the outside signs. It made taking everything down a little bit easier because there weren't just a ton of signage. As far as voter confusion, both polling places need to make sure when you do your setup, you need to have 2 distinct areas. So that's required by law. That's why you can't share a chief and an election team. Everyone has their own. Every precinct has their own team. So make sure that as somebody comes in, that it's fairly easy to see which side of the room you're supposed to go to. Also, it's helpful to have an election officer, and you can rotate this so that when voters come in and that election officer can say, do you vote in Newgate North or Newgate South, or do you not know? And that therefore you do a little bit of triaging there up front to make sure that that voter gets to the right side of the room. So, and if you all need any other information or help or assistance with regards to setup in your co-located, please reach out and we'll help you.
Our lines are always open. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Susan, who has a list of questions for Ravi.
So Ravi, let us talk about ballot scanners.
Mhm.
Do you want everyone to use both scanners during this election or just one?
Sure, great question. So as always, our procedure is always to set up and open both ballot scanners that we issue to you. That said, once you've done that during your open procedures, once you've opened and set up both scanners, printed all the tapes, if you believe you're going to have a low turnout in your precinct, maybe you have fewer registered voters or just voters who aren't as interested in voting a particular type of election, you can take the second scanner and turn it around. Keep it in the same general area, but turn it around and direct voters to use the first one. But we do this for two reasons. We need consistency in all the ballot scanners. We need to make sure that both scanners are open during opening procedures. And so that the second scanner is ready to use immediately if there are any issues with the first scanner during the day. So always set up and open both, but you can turn one around if you don't actively need it.
And Ravi, can I just add one more detail to that? That includes hitting go to voting mode on both of them right at 6 a.m., right? That's what you mean when you say set them up?
That is exactly correct. Thank you, Sean.
And let's talk about setup a little bit. I have a couple of questions here. So if you don't have election officers to help do setup, can someone who's not an election officer come and help you set up the voting area?
Yeah, so if, let's say many of your officers aren't available to help you with setup on the day before the election, if you have a friend or family member that wants to help you post signs or arrange the tables or chairs, that's okay. What they can't do is assist you with anything related to the voting equipment, to the seals, to signing or completing forms. So in general, you want your election officers to be the ones to be present during setup and help you with that. If none of your officers are available, call your rover. They're often going to be available to help you with your setup, and they can be the second person there to assist you with that. And if that doesn't work, call us in the office and we can see what we can do to help you out.
And at the end of setup, you have your black kit. Do you take that with you or do you leave it at the polling place?
So if there's a secure place at the polling place to leave your black kit, you can do so. And that way, if you as the chief, if there's any issues getting to the precinct the next morning, if you're late, or if you have a medical emergency, then it's there for your assistant chief and the other officers to use. If there's not a secure location to leave it at the polling place, then go ahead and take it home with you. What we do not recommend is to say lock it into the school office because no one will be there at 5 a.m. to let you into the school office. So you would want to keep it in the voting room somewhere.
Great. And with IDs, we now have the real ID requirement. Does that affect voting IDs?
Yeah, this is a big one that came up last year. So I'm sorry, that this year, that just the federal government has now started enforcing real ID requirements at airports and other locations. Excuse me. So the question, as I understand, is how does this now affect voting? Are there any changes as it relates to real IDs? And the short answer is no. If if a voter presents an ID that is a real ID compliant credential, or if it's one that doesn't have that little black star in the top right corner, either way, that driver's license can be used for voting purposes. And remember, a driver's license is the one ID that can be used regardless of its expiration date for voting purposes. So in short, no change for voting in terms of the new real ID requirements.
Good. That's good to know. During the day, since we're going to have fewer election officers in the precinct, how do you suggest chiefs handle curbside voting?
So for curbside voting, you always want to send out 2 officers if practicable. And that guidance continues in this election. Most precincts will have enough officers to support this, right? We said there'll be 5 to 8 officers per precinct. The precincts that will only have 5 officers are going to be the fairly small precincts, the ones with fewer than 1,000 registered voters. So in most precincts, you'll have enough officers to be able to send 2 out. If you absolutely can't, if you're juggling a bunch of different issues all at the same time, you can only send 1 person out for curbside voters. That's permissible in those situations. But in general, we strongly encourage you to send out 2 at all times to meet code requirements.
Okay. And last question. How come there's no write-ins on primaries as opposed to a general election?
Good question. So that's just what the Virginia code stipulates, that there are no write-ins in primary elections. you're choosing a candidate, a voter who chooses to vote in a primary is helping choose which candidate will represent that party. But if someone wants to support someone else who's not on the ballot, they have that option available to them in the general election in November, that they can write in someone else if they so desire. But just in general, we're following the laws established here in Virginia.
Can I add to that, Ravi? You'll see that when your ballot scanner tapes print, it'll say write-ins, none. And that's because we want to keep that tape format consistent between elections. In a general election, of course, you'll have write-ins there. For this election, there'll be a very small write-in section where you'll have no write-ins because it's not on.
That's exactly right. And I think Sean is up to his ears in tapes printed from machines during training. So he's all too familiar with that. Susan, I believe that was our last question. Is that right?
That was my last question. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much to all of you as chiefs and assistant chiefs and others who've joined us this morning to go through these briefings and updates for this election. We really appreciate your time. We know we've gone a little bit long here, but we hope we've provided you all the information that you need to be ready for this election. As always, if you have further questions, go ahead and call or email us. You can do that later today, tomorrow, before Election Day, on Election Day. But we're standing by, ready to help you out with anything that may come up. With that, thank you so much. We wish you well in all of your preparations for this election, and we hope you have a great and smooth Election Day. Thank you, everyone.